I'd like to call to order February 20, 2025, 7:30 p.m. Town Council meeting. Would the clerk please call the roll, please?
Councilor Burlingame.
Here.
Councilor Khaleesi. Here. Councilor Greatham. Here. Councilor Steer.
Here.
Councilor Worthy.
Here. Join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, open forum. No one will be signed up. It's the last Thursday of the month. I thought we were going to be busy today. All right, we have a presentation from the Public Water Feasibility Study for Chepachet. Karen, you want to kick us off?
Love to. So for the last year and a half or so, we've been working on a public water feasibility study for Chepachet Village. We've been really lucky to have Northeast Water Solutions as our partner in this project. As we've talked about in the past, some of the biggest challenges that have faced business expansion, business growth, maintaining the businesses we already have in the village is the utilities. There's a lot of really small lots, historic structures, and it's really hard to fit a well and a septic on the same lot. This is especially challenging for commercial development, particularly restaurants or anything that requires a public well, because the public well radiuses for a new public well, we can't hit those radiuses without capturing some septic systems in there. So we've been really stuck with the types of businesses we can get into Chepachet Village. This study, which was funded entirely through grant funding through the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank and Commerce RI, it lays out options for us. It's looked at a bunch of different options for how we can look at water supply in general in the village. Public water being one of the options that was looked at. This isn't anything prescriptive. This is just lays out options for the council to consider as we kind of move forward in the development of Chepachet Village. So with that, I will turn it over to Bob Ferrari with Northeast Water Solutions.
Good evening, and thank you very much for the opportunity to make this presentation. Just to add to what Karen just said, we've been working on this for about a year and a half. We produced an initial draft last October, reviewed it with some what we'll call stakeholders, including Rhode Island Department of Health. Review also included the engineering firm you hired to do an evaluation of wastewater disposal within Chepachet Village. And we tried to look at all aspects of water supply and from the standpoint of not just identifying conditions that might be beneficial to the growth and well-being of the community, but also with a lot of public health considerations. Also how it looking out at a 20, 30, 40-year window, how it really impacts the village and the community and the town in total. So I've got a brief presentation. It's actually we've cut back substantially on the number of slides in here because we have time limitations here. Everybody received. We provided an electronic copy. I did bring one hard copy, which I'm more than happy to leave here. 4-inch thick 3-ring binder there, including all the appendices and mapping and things like that. We'll go through the slides, and then of course, I'm more than happy to answer any questions you might have. This will be an abbreviated presentation because if we try to go through in detail the entire report, we'd probably be here till about midnight. So I don't think anybody wants that. So we'll get moving on this. And also here tonight, Steve Combe, he was one of our principal engineers who worked on the project. Carlene Newman, she retired from the Department of Health. She joined our firm a little over a year ago, and she's had some very valuable input to this also, particularly on the, looking at certain regulatory issues and considerations, her very substantial experience. The first slide, and I realize you can't really see the slides very well, but what are we have severe constraints to economic development. Karen touched on a couple of them, but for example, the vast majority of lots are substantially undersized. Okay, if you're not aware of this, if you want to have a public well, let's assume it's a drilled bedrock well, that well has by regulation of law, a 200-foot protective radius. So you put a point, you take any map, put a point on the ground and do a 200-foot radius around that. You're going to run into buildings, roads, septic systems, drainage, a lot of other contaminant threats, okay? And sets a significant issue. You only have a small number of lots that are even large enough to have, whether it's a public well, even a private well. Just so you're aware, private wells are supposed to have a 100-foot radius around them. So even that, you've got some areas in the village that are very, very tight, and it's been fine as far as the historic development that predated the codes and ordinances, but we have to work within the present day, regulations and ordinances, both at the federal level as well as the state level. The entire community is on on-site septic disposal, so I think everybody's aware of that also. And septic systems are obviously, while they're obviously necessary for wastewater disposal, they are a very significant contaminant threat relative to drinking water supplies, whether those supplies are public or private. We have other contaminant threats in the community. A portion of Chepachet River Park is under an environmental land use restriction. And also monitoring of certainly public wells in the community. By the way, there's 11 public water systems, small public water systems within the defined village area. And over the years, we've had different types of volatile organic contaminants. Some of it is fuel related. We've had some metals contamination. There's been other synthetic organics contamination periodically. Most recently, we've had one or two wells come up with small, relatively low quantities of PFAS. Nothing that, so far that I've seen, that exceeds the current Department of Health limitations or the projected upcoming US EPA limitations. However, the fact that we're now picking up PFAS, it's actually not unusual to be picking that up in a nominally, more urbanized or denser area, but we're picking that up also. And I know probably everybody's heard of PFAS. We're seeing a news report about that. Nothing to panic about, but just bringing that up, that's another contaminant of interest there and of concern. A couple of features of the community. The village is bisected effectively by the Chepachet River. The headwaters are up Smith and Sales Reservoir, and it flows northeast into Burrowville. And when you get to Oakland Village, it combines with the Clear River to form the Branch River. Okay. And by the way, Glocester, Chepachet Village is within the overall Branch River Basin, which is tributary to the Blackstone River Basin. So we're part of a much larger river basin or watershed area here. Okay, which is actually important. Another important thing that affects a lot of what we're talking about here is that the main thoroughfare, as I think everyone knows, is Route 44. That's actually a federal road designation. It's managed by Department of Transportation, but that's obviously, that runs through the village. And effectively, we have a single crossing over the Chepachet River, which also creates some constraints relative to a utility system such as a public water system. Okay, so just some things to keep in mind as we're discussing this. What's on the screen now and what you can see over here, the thicker red line defines the defined Chepachet Village area. Okay, this is what is referred to in the study that was done, the revitalization area. It's about 126 lots in total. You can see it's a little hard for you to see, but those lots are actually defined on there. We have other mapping in the report that more explicitly shows those lots, okay? Of those lots, the substantial majority are already developed. There's a handful that aren't developed at this point in time. This slide that here, and again, I know it's hard for you to see, we simply consulted public record data on water quality monitoring of the public water systems that are in Chepachet Village. A handful of them, my firm actually was either involved in developing them or we provide operating services for them, so we have a lot of information. This is easier for the folks in the audience to see this, but we've got, you'll see some yellow highlights on there, I'm going to step away from the microphone for a moment. I'll try to speak very loudly, and I can repeat it at the microphone if you want, but I want to point a few things out. The water is characterized here in general by moderate alkalinity, but very high chlorides. Those two parameters together are a very powerful consideration relative to corrosion. Chlorides are a very powerful driver. They're a primary driver of corrosion, and corrosion in drinking water systems typically is regulated as lead and copper, okay? But it also, you get corrosion of, you can get corrosion of steel, you can get corrosion of brass, etc. So that's an important consideration here. Also, a lot of your wells have high hardness due to very high calcium. A lot of them have high manganese. Manganese is becoming a much higher profile now. It's considered an emerging contaminant. That's a double-edged sword. The bad news is it's an emerging contaminant, and you're going to have a lot of wells in Chepachet that have elevated manganese. The good news is that's a gateway to project funding. Okay, so you got good and bad there. You got a lot of wells that have a very high iron content in the water. Okay, historically, iron and manganese were considered more secondary contaminants for aesthetics, but when you have levels as high as you have here, they become much more problematic relative to creating problems with water heaters, filters, water using equipment, because they foul everything, they foul piping, and manganese is now is considered an emerging contaminant that is is being regulated now much more stringently, but it's also being used as a source of funding. As, by the way, PFAS is also in the emerging contaminant category. Why do we have a very variable water quality in wells? Because Chepachet Village overlies, believe it or not, 3 different geologic formations. And I know it's hard for you to see this from there, but on this map, the red dots highlight the wells that we have water quality data for. And you've actually got 3 different geologic formations. On the outgoing southeastern side of the village, the best water quality we had of these 7 or so locations we monitored, Romani Orthodontics and Dino's Market had the best water quality. That's because Dino's Market is in what they call the Absalona Formation, and the Romani's well is in what they call an Esmond granite gneiss, whereas the other wells, as you come north, up 44 into more the northern part of the village, you're in a different formation. It's also granite, but it's an Ogden granite, okay? And as you move north, you're getting into much higher levels of contaminants, these contaminants in the wells, okay? And until you understand the geology, which is where it tells you why, that becomes the problem. This geology is also the reason why you have some wells you have some high yielding wells in town, but you have a lot of low yielding wells. And that's because where 2 different geologic formations have what they call a contact face, you get a lot of fracturing and gaps in the bedrock, and water flows through those gaps. So if you happen to get on one of those contact faces and you're drilling a well, you might have a high yielding well. And it doesn't mean you can have a variable water quality, but you can have a high yielding well. And that's one of the reasons why someone here may have a well that's maybe giving a low water yield, and their neighbor, 2 doors down has a very high yielding well. It's like, what did I do wrong? Well, no, it's just where you are relative to the geologic formations underlying the village. Sorry? The purpose of this study that we did, we wanted to determine if there was sufficient water supply sources available. We wanted to qualify a basis of evaluation. We wanted to establish the regulatory, the design, and the operating criteria that's specific to this community. This is important. These evaluations have to be specific to the community you're in, because every well and every community is unique. It doesn't matter what might have been done in Hopkinton. It doesn't matter what might have been done out in Tiverton. You are a unique situation for a whole host of physical and functional conditions, as well as the nature of the community, the topography, just the transportation, the utilities, etc. Every community is unique. We wanted to look at different alternatives, macro scale and micro scale, if you will, and ultimately we wanted to determine what was our best opportunities to achieve your objectives, protect public health, and develop realistic budgets. I'll make an editorial comment. We've all experienced the engineer who comes in, does a great study, and gives you, here's what we project your capital cost to be and your operating cost, and then you go in to do the project and you get sticker shock, okay, because the engineer's estimate was, way off base. We believe we have very good accuracy on our estimating. We've been doing this a long time. We actually build systems as well as operate systems. We do engineering, construction management, and operations, and we do professional level estimating, construction estimating. So we think we vetted out these estimates. We did a lot of, we were getting quotations from suppliers, working with contractors. So I think you can have confidence in the estimates we're going to be putting forward, as you'll see in a little while. Basis of design, we looked at the existing development. We pulled down DEM records for your on-site septic systems. We did a lot of field investigations. Your average daily demand, including the projected build-out of undeveloped lots, and including some expansion or redevelopment of certain lots that already maybe have some development on them. The projected average daily demand at 100% build-out is about 62,000 gallons a day, and your maximum day demand is about 92,000 gallons a day. Okay, now we used a 1.5 peaking factor. That's, I think, within reasonable tolerances. So the village doesn't have a huge demand, but it's certainly not a small demand, okay? We then converted that to what would that equate on a water supply well. What we did is we said we're going to put a 25% contingency factor on top of those volume estimates, and then we said we wouldn't want a well to run more than 12 hours a day or 50% utilization. What that results in is that you would want to serve the entire village district area, you would want a firm or effective well capacity of about 160 gallons a minute, okay? That's how you basically say, well, what do I need for wells? Now you could do that with, one well could do that, or 2 wells, or 4 wells. We're not saying how many wells, but that's what you need for an effective water supply yield. We looked at 4 alternatives. The first alternative was becoming an extension of what was then known as the Pasco Utility District. Their mains come as far south as the Davis Industrial Park. This end of the road is called Money Hill Road. Up there it's called South Main Street. Working 10 years ago, working with Pasco, actually my firm, we developed an exploratory well on the Steer Farm, Buster Steer's property. That well was a very productive well. In fact, it's one of the highest yield wells that we found in northern Rhode Island. We estimated yield as high, we ran it as high as 600 gallons a minute. We think we've got a firm effective yield of 300 to 400 gallons a minute there. And the overall water quality was very good. We have had discussions as recently as in January with Mr. Steer, and he continues to indicate that he's in favor of, he'd be willing to have, work an agreement with the town to develop that well field. Okay. There is a sand and gravel well there. It's what they call an 18 by 24 well. It's a good sized well, but you'd want to have 2 wells there. So that's the first alternative: is put the storage and distribution infrastructure in place for Chepachet Village, and then get your supply from Steer Farm. But it would be as an extension. Pasco would run they would run transmission mains to Pasco and into the village from that location. And so that's alternative number 1. Alternative number 2, we actually have 5 alternatives. And that alternative, the first one was, okay, do the Steer Farm well site, but just do it independently as Chepachet Village with no involvement of what is now the Clear River Electric and Water Utility District. Okay, in that we identified a total of 2 sand and gravel well options and 3 bedrock well options. And I'm going to use this map over here because it's a little easier, I think, for you to see this. And also, the pointer pen also works. Yeah, the laser pen works. This is the Steer Farm site here. The W is like a well location. There's actually a bedrock site up here. This is up near Crystal Lake Golf Course. There's another well site here. This is another sand and gravel location. This is in Glocester Memorial Park, right along the west bank of the Chepachet River. And then we have 2 other areas for bedrock wells. One is here, realistically probably accessed off Spring Grove, and the other one is also accessed off Spring Grove, but it's down near the intersection with Putnam Pike. And we had a number of parcels that were potentially developable. We also have 4 possible storage tank locations. One is the Steer Farm, one is on town property off Adelaide Avenue, one is down here. This is on a private lot across from where Dino's Market is, and another one's up here off Springfield. Just to give a brief explanation, we did not make any determination or any inquiry of the private property owners. We just identified these as potential, from the standpoint of, do we have we think we have the characteristics in the ground for well field development, and or for the tanks we have sufficient elevation, because these would be elevated storage tanks, because you have to have pressure, so you have to have an elevated tank. These were qualified based upon their physical and geologic and topographic characteristics, not on what their availability is. Obviously, town-owned property might have a higher degree of availability than a private property would have. But just to give you some sense of that. Alternative 3 was to look more at developing multiple small systems, small wells within the village or maybe immediately adjacent. We found a total of 5 possible lots within. Well, actually, one is just outside the village, but right next door, an adjacent lot. Those systems could maybe each support serving maybe 20 lots. They're like miniature systems. Okay, a couple of the lots were property on the east bank of the Chepachet River, behind. I think it's what Chepachet Wine and Spirits, and behind the Chepachet Union Church. Another one is accessed probably off of Door Road, and then to the north there's one. A lot was up behind the new Purple Cat property back there, and behind Mark Kravich's property. And then there was a 4th lot swinging over off Adelaide Lane, okay, which is actually town-owned property. So the 4th alternative was to simply say, let's put a little whole house treatment system for every lot, for every house, every commercial business, every restaurant. That was the 4th alternative. Each of these alternatives has a unique set of requirements, operating conditions, costs, regulatory requirements, et cetera, okay? So we went through each of them. And you can see it on here, this is what ultimately happened. We ultimately, we did cost estimating through the first three alternatives. We actually did cost estimating for all of them, capital estimating. We eliminated the fourth one, which is the small individual systems at each house. Well, I'll come to the reasons a little later. We concluded that alternative 3 didn't meet the town's objectives, because the town's objective was, how do we comprehensively serve the entire village district? Well, for only serving 73% of the district, we're not meeting that objective, okay? And there's still a very substantial capital cost without meeting the entire objective, so we don't recommend that alternative. The next aspect of this was, what would we need for infrastructure within Chepachet Village? That's distribution mains, service connections, hydrants, flush points, the whole system constructed, and then ultimately you have to have a water storage tank, an elevated water storage tank. The distribution system in the village, it was looking at about 7,400 feet of 12-inch main, about 4,900 feet of 8-inch distribution main, 28 hydrants, about 100. We just called it 140 service connections. You have 126 lots, but it's actually possible that some lots you might have more than one service connection depending on what was developed there. You have some lots with multiple buildings on them. Also, we have a river crossing over the Chepachet River, and we are doing most of the construction is in state or US 44. Why did we select the primary trunk main to be 12 inches? And by the way, it would extend from down here, in the vicinity of, it's down here on Putnam Pike, taking in, we have some commercial enterprises, comes up through town, and then ends at the north end up on 102 and on Money Hill Road. Okay. Why do we go to 12 inches? Fire flow. Another one of the benefits of alternatives 1 or alternative 2 is we can provide, with the storage tank, enhanced fire protection. You now have a more formalized fire protection system for the community. I know you have fire protection now, but now with the storage tank, we have a hydrant system, and the 12-inch mains are sized so you can get the fire flow through, okay? Because when you have a fire flow, it could be 750 gallons a minute, it could be 1,100 gallons a minute, 1,300, the fire flow requirement is defined based upon a series of criteria: height of building, type of construction, materials of construction, proximity to neighboring buildings. Obviously, within the middle of the village, we've got a lot of buildings close together. So, we made some estimates on that. But for fire flow, you typically want to have probably up to at least, say, 1,500, if not 1,700 gallons a minute capacity, which would be verified, by the way, with the fire department. But you need 12-inch diameter pipes to do that, so that's why we use that size pipe. Our capital budget for this implementation is about $7,845,000. Okay, so it's not inexpensive. Okay, and a large part of that cost, by the way, is because of construction in state roads and US 44. They have very specific construction requirements. They have very specific road restoration requirements, and obviously 44 coming across the Chepachet River, we've got some real constraints there. Okay, so we actually sized this and based it on having an independent bridge structure across the Chepachet River supporting the pipe, as a matter of fact. Because with Department of Transportation requirements, you can hang pipes off bridges, to use a phrase, but you have to do a lot of structural evaluation, and it just might be easier to construct an independent structure, like a steel bridging structure, and support the pipe independent of the existing transportation bridge. Sizing the storage tank, The fire flow requirements, we estimated, worst case, was 1,500 gallons a minute for 2 hours. And then we put we want to have storage for your at least 1 day's demand. We rounded it off to a 300,000 gallon elevated storage tank, okay? That tank would probably be, we want to have the low water line of that tank at about elevation of 450. So you do have areas of the town nearby which are elevation, say, 350, even 400. So that's what we're looking for the storage tank location. You need an elevated location. So you can maybe have the tank's going to be another 100 to 150 feet high, which is pretty standard construction. You can see a lot of these tanks if you drive around Rhode Island or nearby Massachusetts. You'll see a lot of tanks of that nature out there. We have 4 locations, as I mentioned before, and we developed implementation costs for each of them. It's the cost of the storage tank, as well as what the transmission main would be from the storage tank to tie into the village's distribution system. So that's going to vary, okay? The location near Dino's Market was a very short transmission main into that end of the system, and would serve the entire community. Whereas if you're at Steer Farm, you've got a pretty long run coming down, okay? So we have variables there, but we're looking between about 5.6 million to 8 million for the storage tank and transmission main to serve the village, okay? And by the way, we actually went out and worked with a couple or 3 manufacturers of these storage tanks, and we got budget quotes from them. We don't grab numbers like this out of the air. I just want to stress that. This just illustrates what you're seeing right here, as far as the primary trunk main with a couple of loops. We had a loop around Tanyard Lane. We had another loop around Door. Door Road. There are a couple of small internal loops, but it's pretty much a linear system, and it has to be linear because we've got the one river crossing of the Chepachet River. Now, you can get into discussions of water sources because you like to have redundancy. You like to have the ability, if you have a problem, if a line breaks someplace, you don't lose service to the entire community. So there's some questions that are still out there that would have to be addressed in a design phase as opposed to a concept phase. But we base this all on a linear type system. The benefits of alternative 1, it would supply 100% of the Chepachet Village demand, and we looked at a worst case of supplying 50% of what was then the Pasco demand, okay, the Pasco Utility District demand. We have to be careful here because there's this little thing called stream flow depletion. Based upon DEM regulations, there's a maximum extraction of water you can take from the Chepachet River watershed. The good news is for Chepachet Village, because you have septic systems, the entire village is served by septic, water that you pump out of the ground, whether it's a public well or a private well, goes into, say, the house or goes into the restaurant or wherever, 85% of that water on average goes back into the ground. So that's an automatic recharge into the watershed. So your net extraction is only 15% of what you're pumping out. However, water going to Pasco Utility District, that's called the intrabasin transfer. That water goes up to Pasco, goes into the houses, comes out into a sewer system, goes down to the Burrillville Sewage Treatment Plant, and gets discharged into the Clear River, okay? It's still in the Branch River watershed, but it's no longer in the Chepachet River. It's in the Clear River. So we had to take that into account because you have maximum extraction allowances here. Now we're okay with this. We determined that we'd be at about probably 10 or 15% of the allowable extraction. So it's still very safe, but we have to take this into account. And any development that was ever done on, say, a significant water supply, we would have to go to DEM for approval, so that we would have to demonstrate this to them. But that's an important consideration. Other aspects of this, one thing that's very important here is we already have a known quantity on the well field. The other options are all, we have some exploratory work done, but everything else is our best estimate based upon what we know from a geologic standpoint and a hydrologic standpoint. We kind of have a known quantity at Steer Farm, what we have. I'm sorry, Steve?
30 minutes.
Yeah. All right. I'll speed up. You'd have two, you know, we'd want to have 2 wells, a pump house, there'd be some treatment required, okay? This is just demonstrating what we had on stream flow depletion. I'm going to skip past this one. Project budget, total project budget all in. This is including your infrastructure in the community. It's including the well field. It's including the transmission mains up to Pasco. It was 23.5 million. About 6 million would be the Pasco allocation, leaving about 17.6 million as the Glocester allocation. Okay. By the way, in the report, we have very detailed cost estimating sheets presented in the report. You can really vet these numbers out. Alternative number 2, as I said, we had 5 alternatives. I've already described them more or less. The good news is we're at very low percentages of what our allowable extractions are from the watershed, so that we were fine there. We were typically between 7 and 11%. This is just a repeat of this. We've seen this already. This is the range of alternatives with the budgets. The top one is the alternative 1. These other 5 alternatives for developing just a system serving only Chepachet Village, the estimates ran from a low of about 14 million to about 20 million, okay? Some of them are promising, but I think overall you're looking at, in general, probably an equal or higher cost than you would have relative to alternative 1. Any one of them could be very effective and do a good job, but I think you've got to look at the cost factors. Sorry, Steve?
Standalone system?
Yeah. Each one of those 5 alternatives is a standalone system. Okay. Just for clear. Yeah, just for Chepachet. Yeah, exactly. Alternative 3, we eliminated from consideration because we only had 5 possible lots we even felt could meet basic qualifying criteria. There were small distribution systems. We have extensive treatment requirements. You got a lot of iron and manganese. You need pH adjustment. You need corrosion control. You might have some PFAS to deal with. We only served 73% of the lots in the service area. So we felt that, and also when you look at what the capital cost estimate was versus the number of lots served, it was the highest cost per connection. So we just said that doesn't really meet the town's objectives. That wouldn't be. We didn't believe that was a viable alternative. Now, all the information is presented in the report, so we're not. You have it available to review, but I don't think it's viable. I wouldn't recommend it. I'll put it that way. And then the other alternative 4. Why did we eliminate the individual house-by-house units? Number 1, if you want to do that and call it a public water system, you'd have to have 100% participation. Okay, every lot that was developed would have to have a treatment system. Most of the lots would need pretty extensive treatment, and we looked at alternatives of how to treat the water and make it as easy as possible. The problem is when you're doing treatment for things like iron and manganese or hardness, you're going to need a dry well because you're going to produce wastewater from your treatment system, and with all these small lots, you're going to put water into a dry well right next to your well, your neighbor's well. You're going to be recontaminating yourself, and we've seen this happen even with public wells, where we're seeing contaminants accumulate in the ground, and the water quality over the years degrades and degrades and degrades. So there's a host of reasons like this that we finally said we don't think this is viable for the town for a whole host of reasons. And I can assure you, because this question has come up before, it's extremely unlikely that it would be considered viable by the regulatory agencies as a public system. Now, if an individual homeowner wants to do that, anybody can do that. But I think from a regulatory standpoint, it's a non-starter. So our recommendation was, we felt that based upon all the criteria, we presented this in the report, that alternative 1 was the best way to go. Not just because we felt it was a very competitive cost, in relative terms, the most competitive cost for Chepachet, for Glocester, but because you're becoming part of an established utility district. They've already got the management structure, the operational structure, the maintenance structure in place. Okay, that would result in your lowest incremental operating cost addition, okay? Because a lot of your operating costs would be tied up in having to have a department, having to have people, okay? Again, we give you the detail in the report. Now, a couple of the other alternatives are closely competitive. We did a ranking system. We produced scoring for each of the alternatives. We have a couple of other alternatives that aren't that far away on the score, but you've also got to look at what the cost is to the community. You've got both in capital and operating. So that was our recommendation. But again, this is in draft form for your consideration, and we are looking for more feedback here. This isn't, you know, I'm not God, nor do I pretend to be, so it's not my decision. You know, we're laying out the alternatives and as much information as possible. Becoming part of Pasco Utility District is interesting because where there's consideration of doing some regionalization in northern Rhode Island. Thank you, Steve. And what I want to show you here is that
The existing Pasco system, the purple here is Pasco, this is Harrisville. This is now merged into one system, okay? And this would be Chepachet Village. This would be the transmission main if you did alternative one. So now you're becoming part of a larger system. Boroughville is looking to do a municipal system in the Nasonville area. This is the existing small Nasonville system, where transmission main here you now regionalize. And that allows you a lot more security and redundancy as far as water supplies, as far as amortization of costs and things like that. I just wanted to show this to you. You can do this independently as a community, or you can become part of, at the minimum, this larger district here, which is already established. Okay, this is what we're talking about, is an established water system with an established functional structure, administrative, financial, operational, and maintenance structure. It exists, okay? And
that in and of itself is very advantageous. And then we have one more slide here. Actually, I have two more slides, but I'm going to go to the final one on funding. We put this in the report. There's some funding programs out there. I'm discussing here the funding programs that are available in Rhode Island through the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank. And the one that's been around for decades is it's we'll call it the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. And those are 20-year amortization, below market loans, okay, typically 20-year loans. Been used for all kinds of infrastructure for decades in Rhode Island, well-established program. They have an emerging contaminants program. That is grants, okay? And right now, Boroughville is pursuing one for what they want to do with Nasonville, okay? That, I think, if you want to move forward, we strongly recommend we take a close look. We've already had discussions with the Department of Health and the Infrastructure Bank on eligibility. And there's a couple of other funds in here. One is for emerging contaminants with small and disadvantaged communities. They have certain criteria because it's small or disadvantaged communities. And you might qualify on the small. This criteria to establish disadvantage, I have no idea if Gloucester qualifies. You know, Karen might have a better idea than I do on that. And then there's one more that is it's the fourth one down here. It's for disadvantaged and underserved communities, okay? Those are smaller level grants. These last three are grants, okay? Now, what I like about the second one, which is the emerging contaminants, as I mentioned this purposely before, a lot of your water supply, public and private, is contaminated with manganese. Manganese is an emerging contaminant. That gets you qualified for that program, okay? And that can be the first step in a series of stepping stones to full implementation. So I apologize for taking a few minutes longer than we had hoped for. This is a very abridged summation here. I know at least, I think Jean mentioned earlier that she read the report, most of it last night, and I thought that in itself was impressive, okay? It's about 180 pages, but not including the appendices. But there's a lot to read, and this was really just an introductory, presentation for the council. And we're available to answer questions tonight. We're available to come back and have further discussions with you or elaborate on things. Whatever you choose to do is fine with us.
First of all, I want to thank you for all this work and presentation this evening. There's a lot of questions, but one, I just have a definition question. What's an emerging contaminant? Or emergent contaminant?
Carlene, you want to try to address that one?
So it's the Environmental Protection Agency looks on a regular basis at different types of contaminants and causes monitoring to occur throughout the country. And based on the results that they get, they look and see, what type of contaminants out there that they're seeing a lot of that have public health impacts. And from that, they then, they'll from that kind of cull out which ones they think are most important to address. And those are what they call their emerging contaminants. And right now, it would lead to, at least for this part of the country, PFAS and manganese.
So that's why they have those grant programs available for this, because they find it important to look at.
So they basically have public health impact that is, to date had not been addressed through any type of, limits on how much can be in the water. And this is the process they go through to determine what the safe levels are at.
Thank you.
Manganese is some pretty dangerous stuff. Just quick search.
Yeah, for reasons that I don't fully understand. I've been doing this work for 48 years. Manganese was just a secondary contaminant that was considered a potentially aesthetic issue, and no one gave it much consideration. And what's happened is a database has been building for a number of years now about the public health implications. And so Massachusetts, and for that matter Rhode Island, have advisory, they have advisory limits in place. And but now it's getting much more scrutiny. So that's why all these emerging contaminants programs are out there now with funding attached to them.
What type of percentage do you see that the funding will reimburse or match?
Well, what I can tell you right now is that we're with another community. There right now, we're talking about $1 million. That's principally, the idea of that is the next step is the design phase, because the design engineering is pretty involved. Okay, when you're creating something, when you have no system, that particular system has it's going to be larger than what is projected for Glocester. There's 3 river crossings. There's 500,000 gallon storage tank, etc. So right now we're in the process of working with the town on $1 million grant for that. Okay, the grant hasn't been executed yet, but they've got an allocation of $1 million for the community in there. So in relative terms, it's significant. It's a relatively small number relative to say, well, we need $17 million to build this or something like that. But the next step isn't construction. The next step is moving into a design and permitting phase. So so getting that funding in and of itself is pretty substantial and pretty beneficial.
Thank you. So hypothetically, like if we started tomorrow, how many years would it take to get to actually start working on putting shovels in the ground and all that stuff? Hypothetically.
If you started tomorrow, I would suggest to you that you could be in construction probably in 18 months. Okay. You would go out and presumably have a public procurement process for an engineering firm to do the design work. That design would probably take let's give it a year for the design. When you figure all the reviews you have to go through, and then there's also regulatory reviews and permitting. So I'd say 18 months you're out there, you're letting your initial contracts for bid, okay? Recognizing you have to go through reviews with DEM, you have to go through reviews with DOT, Department of Health. At minimum, you've got those reviews, and then there's going to be a lot of other entities that have to, there'll be public hearings and comment periods and things like that. So I think you'd be looking at about 18. I actually provided for Karen initially a projection of total time frame, and it was from, the proverbial, if we started tomorrow and to get, on an aggressive program to completion, it was probably looking at about 4 years in total. Now, that can be affected by, there's a lot of factors, and doing it with the existing Clear River district could actually speed things up, as opposed, because they already have a lot of their administrative infrastructure in place. Yes, you have to negotiate agreements with them, but they already, it's a little easier for an existing public water system to jump into a program on one of these funding programs. As a new system, you can still do it, but there's more steps. You have to get certain resolutions. You've got to create the water district or the municipal district. That might require legislation, things like that. So those are factors that you have to think about. Okay, the Pasco/Clear River, their enabling legislation gives them the right to expand, the right and ability to expand. They don't have to go back now for another, say, resolution in the state legislature or anything like that. They already got that when they did the merger. So there's considerations like that that could have potential time impacts on there. But looking at it strictly as an engineer, saying, okay, get designs done, get all the reviews done, get all the permitting done, appropriate bidding process, construction in phases. You're probably looking at 4 years total for the project, something like that.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? It's good? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Again,
you.
for taking the time putting this all together. All right, consent items, discussion, interaction. A, approval of town council minutes, regular meeting of February 6, 2025. B, tax assessors additions and abatements, January 2025. C, finance director's report, January 2025. Can I get a motion?
Make a motion to approve the addition to the 2024 tax roll in the amount of $341.14, no abatements to the 2024 tax roll, and to accept the finance director's report for January 2025.
Wait a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Unfinished business, A, boards and commissions, discussion, interaction, appointment, discussion, interaction, parade committee, continued from 9/5/2024. Number 1, alternate. Number 2, alternate. Number 3, there are no recommendations at this time. Council can appoint from the talent bank listing or table to the next meeting. Can I get a motion?
Make a motion to table the appointments to the parade committee, alternate number 2 and alternate number 3 to the town council meeting of March 6, 2025.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Planning board position number 3 for 5-year term to expire 2/27. There's a recommendation from the chair at this time. The chair recommends resident Brian White. A talent bank listing is on file. Council can appoint the recommended applicant, appoint someone from the talent bank, or table to the next meeting.
I'll make a motion to appoint Brian White to the planning board, position number 3 for the unexpired 5-year term to expire 2/27.
A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. C, Land Trust, one member at large from Planning Board, one term to expire 1/31/2026. The position became vacant last month due to the resignation of the at-large member from the Planning Board. The Planning Board Chair has no recommendations at this time, but indicated they will have one before long. Can I get a motion?
Motion to table the appointment of the member at large position to the land trust from the planning board.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Motion passes. Board of Commission appointments terms concurrent with Town Council will expire 12/31/2026. Discussion or action, Economic Development Board position number 3, 2-year term to expire 12/31/2026. 1 ad hoc non-voting member, 2-year term to expire 12/31/2026. 1 ad hoc non-voting member, 2-year term to expire 12/31/2026. At the recommendation of the chair at this time, Chair recommends Resident Louis Pryor, talent bank listing is on file. Council can appoint the recommended applicant, appoint someone from the talent bank, or table to the next meeting. Can I get a motion?
I'll make a motion to appoint Louis Pryor to position number 3 on the Economic Development Commission for a 2-year term to expire at 12/31/26.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Yeah,
Yeah, you have to table unless you have other.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to table position number 1, ad hoc voting position, to the 3/5 meeting.
Oh, second. Is it the 6th or the
12/31/2026.
No, I mean the next
The
meeting.
next meeting is 3/5 or 3/6,
3/6.
to the 3/6 meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Ayes have it. And then the last.
The 11th.
Okay. So number 2, we need second ad hoc as well. Table that to 3/6 as well.
Yep, I'll make a motion to table the number 2 ad hoc non-voting position on the Economic Development Commission for a 2-year term, expire 12/26 to the 3/6 meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
B, Affordable Housing Advisory Board, number 1, position 2, 3, 4, and 5, terms to expire 12/31/2026. Council has not received a recommendation from the town planner at this time. Council can appoint from the talent bank list or wait for the recommendation of the town planner. Can I get a motion?
Motion to table positions number 2, 3, 4, and 5 to the Affordable Housing Advisory Board to the Town Council meeting of March 6, 2025.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, new business. Resident claim for damage compensation, discussion or action. Council Brody.
Yep, so I just had a town's person, Mr. Bazione, contact me about a pothole that his wife hit on Turtle Lot. It popped the tire, he went to the Public Works, they denied his claim because they hadn't notified them beforehand. He was gonna come here, we decided not to, but I just wanna make everybody aware of it, we seem to be looking out for those potholes, a lot more growing, with this weather here, they're just like popping up everywhere, so going forward, we're just gonna have to watch a little more for them, but, I told him it would be a special exception by the council, we have to vote to make an exception, and he decided not to come tonight.
Okay.
Okay?
On the next agenda?
No.
Okay.
No need.
All right. B, Finance Office request transfer of line item in current budget year, fiscal year 25, discussion and action. Council received a request from the Finance Director, memo, Honorable Town Council from Elizabeth A. Beltram, Finance Director, re-fiscal 2025 budget transfers, date February 20th, 2025. Below the recommended budget transfers for fiscal year 2025, the amounts and account codes are as follows. To increase Department Highway, DPW Highway 01-051-2010, description wages in the amount of $37,779. Line item 2, DPW Highway 01-051-2018, longevity, $200. DPW Building Grounds 01053-2010, wages, $9,263. DPW Vehicle Maintenance 01-054-2010, wages, $10,360. DPW vehicle maintenance 01-054-2018, longevity $100. DPW waste 01-052-2010, wages $14,809. DPW waste 01-052-2018, longevity $300. To decrease,
Mr. President, I think that number on the wages was $14,849 on my sheet.
did I not say 14,849?
I thought you said $14,809. I could be wrong.
Okay, just to be clear, $14,849 for 01-052-2010. To decrease other operating expenses, 01-082-2273, negotiations, in the amount of $72,851. Transfers are to allocate the funds set aside for the final contractual increases to the line items that were affected in the FY '25 budget. Respectfully, Elizabeth A. Beltram, in the memo.
Make a motion to approve the transfer of the $72,851 from other operations account in the FY '25 budget to the several accounts as follows: DPW highway wages in the amount of $37,779. DPW highway longevity wages in the amount of $200. DPW buildings and ground wages in the amount of $9,263. DPW vehicle maintenance wages in the amount of $10,360. DPW vehicle maintenance longevity wages in the amount of $100. DPW waste wages in the amount of $14,849. DPW waste longevity wages in the amount of $300.
Okay, a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it. Legislative updates, discussion, or action. Anybody have any legislative news or questions? There's so much being spoken about right now at the State House.
The deputy went through the latest ones from the last council meeting, and I'll send you all a report on them tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Town council correspondence discussion. Anybody have any correspondence they've dealt with? We have notice from the FERC, Federal Energy Regulation Commission, of the hydroelectric project at the Manville Dam. We also have a receipt from the annual legislative priorities booklet from the RA League of the City of Towns, and the DOT bridge inspection reports. I also got a call today in regards to John Lutz's department. Somebody needed some oil, and we had it in the budget. I sent it to Beth, and Beth said it was okay because said person has not had any problems with that department needing oil. So, yeah, in his budget, I guess they help with some oil.
Yeah, we have the I think it's, they get like to 100 gallons,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
As long as he meets the criteria,
Correct.
lives in town.
She did.
Okay.
But it was just a phone call, so I put her in the right bucket, and they made it happen. She also wanted me just to say that, you know, the winter is a little harsher this year, and more people might reach out for that service.
Yeah, for 500 gallons in the past 2 months,
Yeah.
so we'd say.
It's
Yeah.
been a-
Third
it's been a
full
colder
delivery.
winter,
Yeah.
the last few years.
Department head reports, does anybody, department heads have anything? Boards and commission reports?
I got one.
Oh, hey,
Hello. I just want to let the community know that the senior center does have free tax preparation services all throughout the month of March. On Tuesdays, you would just have to call the center to make an appointment.
awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Boards and commissions, anybody here? All right, open forum, do we have a line of people that wanna? Oh, it's quiet here. All right, right, we need a motion for the executive session, please.
I'll make a motion to add executive session item for discussion only pursuant to RIGO 42-46-5A2, sessions pertaining to collective bargaining.
We don't need to do that one, Paul.
We don't need to do that one?
That one we don't need to add that.
Okay.
All right, how about
Well, then I'll move to
the next executive?
convene to executive session pursuant to RIGO 42-46-5A2, sessions pertaining to collective bargaining, litigation, or work sessions pertaining to collective bargaining or litigation. 1, discussion by council, vote, or other action regarding negotiations for successor union contracts. 2, discussion by council, vote, or other action regarding injured on duty and retirement benefits pursuant to IBPO 638 contract.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Oh,
All right, can I go get a roll call, please?
Counselor Burlingame.
Aye.
Counselor Polisi.
Aye.
Counselor Greathouse.
Aye.
Counselor Steer.
Aye.
Counselor Renz.
Aye. Motion passed.